Chemtrails. The sky beneath the veil. For decades, the sky above us has been a symbol of freedom, possibility, and vast, open space. It holds the mysteries of the cosmos and the everyday wonders of weather, birds soaring in the wind, and planes cutting through clouds. But in the late 20th century, a new phenomenon began to take shape, one that would raise eyebrows, stir conspiracy theories, and ignite debates. It wasn't a natural cloud formation or a new weather pattern. It was something much more sinister: chemtrails. The beginning of a mystery. It all started with something seemingly innocuous: contrails. Contrails, short for condensation trails, are the streaks of cloud-like formations that are visible behind airplanes, particularly at high altitudes. These trails are created when water vapor from the plane's exhaust interacts with the cold air at high elevations, forming ice crystals that appear as white streaks in the sky. For many years, these contrails were simply accepted as a natural byproduct of aviation. But in the 1990s, a growing number of people began noticing something strange. The contrails didn't just disappear after a few minutes, as they had in the past. They lingered in the sky for hours, spreading out to form thin veils that seemed to cover the entire sky. What once looked like a simple streak in the sky was now transforming into a hazy film, one that made the atmosphere appear unnaturally overcast. At first, people assumed it was simply an oddity of weather patterns or a result of more planes in the air. But as the phenomenon continued and grew more noticeable, some began to ask, was there something more to these persistent trails? Could they be something beyond the harmless water vapor that had always been attributed to them? Were these chemtrails, a term coined by conspiracy theorists, actually chemical substances being deliberately released into the atmosphere? The rise of the chemtrail theory. In the early days of the chemtrail theory, those who claimed to see something more in these trails were often dismissed as conspiracy theorists. However, their concerns grew louder and more widespread. They pointed out that the contrails didn't behave like typical condensation trails. Instead of dissipating quickly, they expanded, spread, and hung in the air. In some cases, they appeared to form grid-like patterns across the sky, a phenomenon that seemed too perfect to be random. At the heart of the chemtrail theory was the idea that the government or a secret organization was spraying chemicals into the atmosphere for a variety of purposes. These substances, according to theorists, could range from harmful chemicals intended to alter the weather, control the population, manipulate the environment, or even cause illnesses. Some believed that chemtrails were part of a covert program to combat climate change by dispersing reflective particles into the atmosphere to block sunlight, a theory known as geoengineering. Others speculated that the chemicals were designed to control human behavior, or to intentionally poison people for population control. The most extreme theories even claimed that chemtrails were part of an extraterrestrial agenda, with unknown entities using the trails to prepare the Earth for some cosmic event. The spread of the chemtrail phenomenon. As the years went on, the chemtrail theory gained more traction, fueled by online forums, documentaries, and books. Social media allowed people to share their experiences of seeing unusual trails in the sky, sometimes followed by strange weather patterns, unexplained illnesses, or increased respiratory issues in the population. The more these stories circulated, the more people began to look up at the sky, noticing the trails themselves and wondering what they really were. In 1999, a former Air Force officer named William Thomas published a book titled Chemtrails: The Truth Behind the Mystery, which claimed that the trails being left behind by planes were part of a covert military operation. According to Thomas, the U.S. government had been engaged in a secret program to manipulate the atmosphere, either for weather control or some other undisclosed reason. His book and interviews brought significant media attention to the issue, and the idea of chemtrails began to spread far beyond the usual conspiracy circles. Scientists and meteorologists quickly debunked the claims of chemtrails, asserting that the trails seen in the sky were simply the result of condensation from jet exhaust and atmospheric conditions. They argued that the long-lasting contrails were a result of increased air traffic and changes in weather patterns, and that they posed no threat to human health. The scientific community dismissed chemtrails as a misunderstanding of how contrails form, insisting that there was no evidence to suggest that harmful chemicals were being dispersed in the atmosphere. Despite the official explanations, skepticism remained, and for some, the idea of chemtrails seemed more plausible than ever. The persistent nature of the trails, the patterns they formed, and the growing body of anecdotal evidence seemed to validate their suspicions. The environmental impact as chemtrail theories spread, questions about the potential environmental impact of widespread aerosol spraying began to surface. If these chemicals were being intentionally released into the atmosphere, what effects could they have on the planet? The chemtrail community was especially concerned about the possibility of these substances causing harm to ecosystems and the health of humans, animals, and plants. One of the most alarming aspects of the theory was the suggestion that heavy metals such as aluminum, barium, and strontium were being dispersed in the atmosphere through chemtrails. These metals, theorists argued, could contribute to a wide range of health problems, including respiratory diseases, neurological damage, and even cancer. Some believed that the increase in these chemicals could lead to acid rain, soil contamination, and the destruction of wildlife. As the theories gained popularity, independent researchers and environmental activists began testing soil and water samples in areas that were known to have heavy air traffic. Some results showed higher than normal concentrations of metals like aluminum and barium, which seemed to lend credence to the chemtrail claims. However, many scientists refuted these findings, suggesting that the presence of these metals was simply a result of environmental pollution and not the direct result of chemtrail spraying. The psychological impact beyond the environmental and health concerns, the chemtrail theory also began to have a profound psychological impact on the public. For those who believed in chemtrails, it was a deeply unsettling realization that the very air they breathed might be intentionally poisoned, and that governments or powerful corporations were secretly manipulating the world around them. For some, the discovery of chemtrails felt like a betrayal, a breach of trust. The sky, once a symbol of peace and serenity, was now tainted by suspicion. People started to question not only the intentions of those in power but the very nature of the information they were receiving from the government and the media. If the government could hide something as large as chemtrails, what else were they concealing? As a result, chemtrails became more than just a conspiracy theory. They became a symbol of distrust in authority and a reflection of the growing sense of alienation many people felt toward institutions and the mainstream narrative. The question of, who can we trust, was no longer confined to political figures or corporations but extended to the very skies above. The continuing debate, as with many conspiracy theories, the debate over chemtrails continues to this day. For some, the evidence is irrefutable, and the theories only grow more complex. Others, including scientists and aviation experts, continue to argue that chemtrails are nothing more than a misunderstanding of common atmospheric phenomena. The mainstream scientific consensus remains that contrails are simply the result of condensation from jet exhaust, and there is no evidence to support the idea that they are intentionally dispersing harmful chemicals into the atmosphere. Yet, the notion of chemtrails refuses to fade. As new technology and surveillance equipment make it easier to track planes and their exhaust emissions, some wonder whether there is more to the story than we are being told. The conversation has evolved, with some proponents of the theory focusing on geoengineering, and the possibility that governments may be experimenting with climate control, an idea that, while still controversial, has become a growing area of research in both scientific and conspiracy circles. In the end, whether chemtrails are real or simply a product of misinterpretation, they have become a symbol of a deeper, more pervasive concern. The relationship between the public and the powers that govern, the trust in what we are told, and the questions that remain unanswered. As long as the skies above us remain vast and filled with mystery, so too will the theories that swirl within them. The global perspective. Chemtrails around the world. As the chemtrail phenomenon gained more attention in the United States, it began to spread beyond borders. People across the globe started noticing unusual contrails in their skies, prompting a surge of similar conspiracy theories in countries ranging from Canada to Australia, the UK, and even parts of South America. In these regions, reports of persistent, spreading trails in the sky fueled suspicions of global-scale spraying operations. One of the most striking aspects of this global spread was the consistent patterns of sightings. In some places, individuals reported seeing planes fly over, leaving behind thick trails that would span entire horizons. In other regions, strange, grid patterns, and crisscrossing contrails were observed, adding to the sense that something deliberate was happening in the skies. In some parts of Europe, chemtrail activists formed groups and held public meetings, sharing their concerns about the trails and their potential consequences. Some of these activists went as far as organizing campaigns to pressure their governments for answers. They sent letters to local officials, asking for investigations into the possibility of toxic substances being sprayed from planes. Several petitions were launched in attempts to force governments to reveal the truth, demanding transparency on what, if anything, was being released into the air. Despite the widespread reports and the growing number of concerned citizens, no country has officially acknowledged the existence of chemtrails or any secret programs involving aerosol spraying. Governments have continued to insist that contrails are harmless and that any claims of deliberate spraying are unfounded. However, the absence of clear answers from the authorities only deepened the suspicions of chemtrail believers, reinforcing the theory that governments and corporations were conspiring to hide the truth. The link to geoengineering as environmental concerns about climate change became more urgent in the 21st century. The conversation around geoengineering began to gain more attention. Geoengineering refers to the deliberate manipulation of the Earth's climate to counteract the effects of global warming, usually through methods like carbon capture or solar radiation management. Some scientists have proposed using technologies such as injecting reflective particles into the atmosphere to block sunlight and cool the planet, a technique known as solar geoengineering, or stratospheric aerosol injection. These methods, while still largely theoretical, align closely with the concerns of chemtrail proponents. The idea that governments or private organizations could be experimenting with aerosol spraying on a large scale to combat climate change makes the concept of chemtrails seem less like a conspiracy and more like a possible, though controversial, scientific project. However, the public's awareness of geoengineering has only further muddied the waters of the chemtrail debate. While geoengineering projects are often proposed as temporary measures to mitigate the effects of climate change, chemtrail theorists argue that the very existence of such technologies means that governments could already be testing them covertly. Some even suggest that what they are witnessing in the skies, the lingering, spreading contrails, could be a result of geoengineering programs already in operation, aimed at altering the climate or controlling global weather patterns. Scientists who support geoengineering often emphasize the potential risks and uncertainties of such technologies, as well as the need for further research. Meanwhile, the chemtrail community holds firm in its belief that the spraying of chemicals is already happening, despite the lack of concrete evidence. The rise of chemtrail whistleblowers, as the debate continued to rage, another layer of intrigue was added by the emergence of alleged whistleblowers. Some individuals who claimed to have worked in aviation, government, or the military came forward with stories that aligned with the chemtrail theory. These whistleblowers told stories of being part of covert operations that involved the spraying of chemicals from planes, sometimes under the guise of military exercises or environmental research. One of the most famous figures in the chemtrail community is a man named Clifford Carnicom, an independent researcher who has made it his mission to investigate what he believes are the harmful effects of chemtrails. Carnicom has spent years studying samples of dust and water he claims were contaminated by the alleged chemicals released by planes. According to his research, the samples contained bacteria and fibers that he suggests were the result of chemtrail spraying. While many of his claims have been dismissed by the scientific community as lacking empirical evidence, Carnicom's work continues to resonate with those who believe in the chemtrail conspiracy. Other whistleblowers have shared their own stories, suggesting that they were part of secret government programs that involved the use of advanced technologies to manipulate weather patterns or control populations. They claim that chemtrails are merely one facet of a much broader and more sinister agenda, one that involves global power structures working together to control human behavior and the environment. Though these individuals' claims are highly disputed, they have contributed to the sense that the government is hiding something, and that the true nature of chemtrails is more than a mere conspiracy theory. Some theorists argue that these whistleblowers are simply a small glimpse of a larger operation, one that involves countless people who have been silenced or intimidated into staying quiet about the reality of chemtrail spraying. A continued debate in the digital age. The rise of the internet and social media has played a significant role in the persistence of the chemtrail theory. Platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter have allowed individuals to share videos, photos, and stories about their experiences with chemtrails, creating an ever-expanding network of believers. The ease with which information, whether verified or not, can be disseminated has given rise to echo chambers where individuals can reinforce their beliefs without being confronted by scientific evidence or opposing viewpoints. For many, the information available online has become their primary source of truth. Videos showing unusual trails in the sky, combined with alarming commentary about government secrecy, have made it difficult for people to distinguish between fact and fiction. Some individuals claim to have documented chemtrail activity in various parts of the world, offering up evidence of the ongoing conspiracy. But for every person who insists they have proof of chemtrails, there is another person, often a scientist or aviation expert, who offers a simple explanation of how contrails form. In the digital age, the battle over chemtrails is no longer confined to casual conversations or obscure publications. It is now a global conversation, one that takes place in online forums, through social media posts, and in countless blogs and videos. The lack of concrete answers from governments and scientific authorities has allowed the theory to thrive, feeding on uncertainty and fear. The ongoing mystery. As we continue to look up at the skies, the question remains: are chemtrails real, or are they a product of misunderstanding and misinterpretation? The scientific community insists that they are nothing more than ordinary contrails, but for those who believe in the chemtrail theory, the mystery remains unsolved. The unexplained nature of the phenomenon, the lack of transparency from authorities, and the growing body of anecdotal evidence have all contributed to a belief that the truth is being deliberately hidden. Whether chemtrails are a genuine government conspiracy, a byproduct of climate control experimentation, or simply the result of natural atmospheric processes, the debate continues. For some, the very notion that their skies could be manipulated from above is too unsettling to dismiss. Others cling to the hope that science will one day provide the answers, or that the government will finally come clean about what is really happening above our heads. Until that day comes, the mystery of chemtrails remains, lingering in the sky like the trails they leave behind, persistent, elusive, and surrounded by a cloud of suspicion.